write about. I can handle the writing. Well, I'm satisfied with my world reputation, in which I'm not categorized within the ghetto. It's really just in the United States that I'm still stuck in the ghetto. I don't really care. I can't even, if you asked me at this moment to define science fiction, I couldn't even do it for you. I mean, it's like jazz. I mean, I won't quote any of the cliches, but I'm sure you know what I mean. I would rather reach a broader audience, but in no way do I repudiate the science fiction audience.
Hey, dickheads, like a pink laser beam of truth beaming from Southern California and Ohio to your brain holes. We are your personal dickheads. We have not turned an argument with our wives into a book, but Philip K. Dick did. And that's called The Man Whose Teeth Were All Alike. I am David Agranoff, the author of The Last Night to Kill Nazis, a book that just recently came out. On my left on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, maybe, or is it different for all of us?
It should be on your right. Wait.
Okay. Anyways.
It would be on your right.
Coming from Ohio to your brain holes, Professor David Harlan Wilson. David, tell them who you are and what you do.
Hello, I'm who you said I am. I will plug my latest book, Nietzsche, the Unmanned Autohagiography. Good man. Thank you. Raw Dog Screaming Press is the publisher. I don't know what it is. It's an ultra biography and metafiction and satire and all kinds of fun, I hope.
And I'm pretty sure Philip K. Dick gets mentioned at least once in it.
Yes, at least several times, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, if I can crowbar him in, I try to.
Yeah. And Professor Wilson, you also have a Kubrick book coming, right?
Yes, that is in. I finished that about a year ago. That's through Liverpool University Press, their new Kubrick Studies series, and it is in the editorial stage right now. So I'm hoping that comes out next summer.
Now, is that all the same thing as the Nietzsche book?
No.
That's totally different. Yeah, it's a work of kind of experimental science fiction theory and criticism and film studies.
Our third dickhead today is
I'm Langhorne J. Tweed.
Langhorne J. Tweed. Larry, tell the folks who you are and what you do.
I'm Langhorne J. Tweed.
Exactly. All right, let's move on. So first up today is PKD News. The first item of news.
Funny this time, isn't there?
What?
It seems like the message boards or whatever we call them nowadays, the groups or rooms or pages, whatever we call them, are just lit up recently with PKD activity.
Yeah, there is, and a lot of that stuff I don't put on here because it's stuff that
it's very PKD.
It's articles about I read Game Players of Titan for the first time and discovered it said this.
No, but I'm talking about like different festivals popping up and different events.
Well, we can promote that next year, the PKD Fest in Fort Morgan, which we talked with Lord Running Clam in our last episode that came out. Dick Fest in Fort Morgan next June in Colorado, and at least 2/3 of the dickheads will be there, the current dickheads. So the ones whose names start with a D are going to be there, and representing and hanging out. And I know for a fact I'm giving a talk on the unfinished stuff, which of course I just finished writing the book on. So that'll be fun. But that's neither here nor there. The first item that I wanted, there's a lot of music news related to PKD, which is interesting and weird. But there, for example, and I put an article, there's an avant-garde band called Cellar Dweller that played Psych Music Fest that was apparently in Ohio. Galen, Ohio, at the Troubadour Farm, I guess.
I don't know.
But they did a PKD themed set, and they did this performance, and they hinted that this would eventually become a concept album inspired by Philip K. Dick and UFO abductions. And the only time Philip talked about UFO abductions was Confessions of a Crap Artist.
And this book.
And what?
And this book.
And this book, yeah. Because apparently Marion County was a hotbed of UFO activity in the early 60s. And the next thing of music-oriented things is that there was a performance of the Valis Opera in Boston. And we're not going to go too deep into this performance that happened this month in September of 2023, because we are devoting a whole episode to friend of the podcast, Bill Cyril, who was one of Phil's very good friends, managed to get himself a ticket at the last minute and got himself in. And we interviewed, Professor Wilson and I interviewed Bill about his experience watching the opera. So you can go watch that episode. And that's a good reminder that if you're wondering where, like, you keep talking about some of these episodes, I don't know where they are. It's because the bonus episodes are in a separate feed on Apple, which is the PKD Heads bonus. So if you're not subscribed to the PKD bonus, you're not going to get those episodes. So make sure you're subscribed to those as well. Now, if you're following our episodes on SoundCloud, you're going to get them all because they're all going to be there. If you're following them on,
confusing.
Yeah. And if you follow them on YouTube, you're going to get them all because they're all there on YouTube. One other piece we can tell you is that Bill also mentioned that it is the intention for that opera to go on the road, and the next time will be in China. So if you want to go to China to see the PKD opera, maybe plan it along with your trip to the Hugo Awards in China. And then the last news item is the Carnegie Center, which is a art center in Lexington, Kentucky, is doing an event called it's the Carnegie Classics Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the book that inspired Blade Runner film series. There's going to be an open bar, live music, food carts, and
open bar. I'm in.
Yeah. It says an out of this world experience. Humans and replicants alike, 18 ages plus, are invited to walk along the pages of Philip K. Dick's 1968 cyberpunk dystopian novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Saturday, November 4th, from 7 to 11 p.m. at the Carnegie Center. Explore sounds and visuals designed to awaken empathy, improve our humanity. Come dressed in your 80s post-apocalyptic best for a literary experience. And there's a open bar and a no bar ticket. So, but that's it says this, and then the ad says escape the off-world colonies. So it's they've got something fun planned, and that's
it sounds like they know what they're doing. I mean, at least by the wording and the empathy, and it sounds like they've definitely read the book. Put it that way.
Yeah. And I like that it's titled after the book and not titled Blade Runner.
Yeah, because Blade Runner has a totally different connotation than the book. I mean,
yeah. Now, I grew up in Indiana, and we were constantly told to make fun of Kentucky. It's like it's kind of a tradition. Kentucky makes fun of us. We make fun of them. So I was surprised to see anything cool happening in Kentucky that wasn't in Louisville, which is a city I do like. I do like Louisville, and I have a lot of good friends from Louisville. But if you're out there and you're near Kentucky, this would be a fun, or if you're in the Midwest, this might be a fun event.
Yeah, I spent a month in Evansville doing a show. And
that's right by Kentucky.
That is on the border. So I got to hear a lot about Kentucky and Indiana relationships.
Yeah, they don't like each other. Yeah, no. It's like a thing. This book, now we always do the what was happening when, and we usually do that based on when a book was published.
Yeah,
but I don't think that's now. No, I think we should do 1960 when this book was written because I
Is that
think it
because
has.
you didn't do anything for 1984?
I did not, in fairness. I did it for 1960, but if you have something for 1984, we can talk about the differences between. That's actually curious because if
The
you think about
Olympics, Scarface,
How about how
Strike.
shitty that Wonder Woman 1984 movie was? Holy
Oh,
cow.
wow.
yeah,
Great performance by what's his face, but that movie was trash.
Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't mind the first one. I just didn't like the second one. But
Well, it was, but you could say something. It was published, right, by Mark V. Ziesing in 1980 for the Indie Press.
Is that who it is?
who
Yeah.
is the publisher of my favorite horror novel of all time, Wet Bones,
Oh,
by John
really?
Shirley? Also the same publisher.
Dolan,
Shout out.
is it this one you're talking about?
No, That's the British edition.
Oh, this one's brilliant, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this.
Golan's. What is the? I can't see what the company.
Well, I think Orion is the imprint, and I think they
Oh, is
have
it? Okay.
they must own
Oh
the
yeah,
right
Orion.
to a lot of the mainstream novels. I think almost all of them they
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
And they did the paperback first in '88. I can tell you that.
Oh, okay.
So the book was written in 1960. So think about that. It was this long time ago, 1960, and the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild were on strike in 1960 at the same time, which is crazy because that's happening right now, which is
Right.
really weird. But a lot of times when they talk about the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild striking, they'll talk about how this hasn't happened since 1960, right? And so the first thing that I thought of when I was thinking about the fact that this was written in 1960 was that this was also the year that JFK announced he was running for president. And so think about it, this got published in '84. So
Wait, what?
Kennedy announced that he was running for president in '60, and it was published in '84 when Mondale was the Democratic candidate going against Reagan.
And
That's a huge little skip of time between this didn't get published until Reagan was president. And so think about how much had changed in the world. You'd gone from the Mercury program to the space shuttle. You've gone from,
no civil rights to civil rights.
yeah, black and white TV to VCRs. Like a lot happened
No
in the time.
abortion to legal abortion.
Yeah, and now we're back to, yeah, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But here's, I mean, that's a pretty crazy thing to think about when you're thinking just about the context of this here.
I was thinking that throughout this book. I was really thinking like this is, I mean, not in the context of it was so long ago, but in the context that it wasn't that long ago. Like this is one lifetime ago, basically.
Yeah.
It's 80 years ago, roughly, 70 to 80 years that everything in this book has changed.
Yeah.
Nothing in this book is the same
way
as
it is now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
I know.
So, the writing and publication history of, so we didn't do, what we didn't do, Larry? Because we didn't do what was happening because we couldn't determine which year.
Well, you did. You did.
Okay. Well, no, we did it.
We didn't do the bit. We didn't do
the bit. And some of our folks out there might be wondering, like, what happened to the bit.
All right. Well, let's do it real quick. All right. Go ahead.
Larry, what was happening?
No, I say that.
Oh, no. Okay.
You say the year.
The year was 1960.
David, what was happening in the year 1960?
Well, it's funny you should ask, Larry, because I already told you.
There we did it.
There we did it. All right. So, on to the writing and publication history. Now, this one is curious because we have a little bit less details, even in Lord Running Clam's Pink Beam Companion, about The Man Whose Teeth Were Alike, because this was kind of a book that Phil didn't have much appreciation for. He kind of submitted it once and it kind of went away. And he was also very busy at the time because he had just finished Confessions of a Crap Artist and was doing the final edits on a little novel called Vulcan's Hammer. And the reason why he was doing these edits on Vulcan's Hammer is because the book was 5 years old when Ace decided to publish it. And so he felt like he needed to do another pass on Vulcan's Hammer. Now, Vulcan's Hammer, people should know.
Underrated book. Underrated book.
Yeah, at least 2/3 of the Dickheads really appreciate Vulcan's Hammer and think it's underappreciated.
I think Anthony liked it too.
Yeah, Anthony did like it too.
Isn't that the last book that you can put into that golden age category before he becomes truly Phil Dickian?
No.
Vulcan's Hammer? No?
No, there's still a golden age. I wouldn't call it the golden.
Well, no, you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
before.
It's one of those
early books.
Yeah, I shouldn't say that. I didn't mean golden age science fiction.
Yeah, it definitely has that early pulp feel. And the thing is that, and one of the reasons why we always prop it up is because a lot of people shit on Vulcan's Hammer as being terrible, and there's many people, and in fact, I think Lord Running Clam is one of the ones who's not a big fan of it. And
which is, I just have to say, after editing the Lord Running Clam thing, I had no idea how involved I was with that guy. Because every episode, I have his review and the cast of characters on the screen, on my other screen for every episode. So
that's why I said we were preparing.
Basically, I read his synopsis of the book and see what he says, and I've had a whole relationship with this person I didn't even know who it was, and now I found out who that person is.
Lord Running Clam is super important, and he has an Indiana background, so woohoo!
It seems like everybody does all of a sudden.
A little bit.
I lived there for 5 years.
Exactly.
I lived there for less than a year, but
you lived there, so let's go Hoosiers. So on that note,
I lived there when they were in the Final Four. So,
ooh.
So here's the thing about. Well, one of the reasons why we constantly prop up Vulcan's Hammer is a lot of people take poopy on it and say that it's one of his worst novels, and they're obviously smoking something because
it's because
clearly
basically it's a straight sci-fi pulp sci-fi book. You know, it doesn't have any of the alternate reality stuff, and it doesn't have any of that.
It doesn't do a lot of the Dickian things.
Yeah, but it's fantastic. I kind of compare that to Kerouac's The Town and the City, which is his first book that he published, which is a straight story of a family, a Midwest or a East Coast, but sort of Midwestern type family. And there's nothing crazy in it, nothing beatnik about it. It's more like a Steinbeck novel or something, or F. Scott Fitzgerald, or you could see the skill of a writer in that, and you could see in Vulcan's Hammer that if Dick chose to, he could have written straight science fiction all day, and not taken any chances, but he chose to go out on that limb just like Kerouac did. It's great.
Yeah, and I appreciate Vulcan's Hammer for that too. And I think an example of the pulp era PKD where it's done wrong, I think a better example of that is Dr. Futurity, for example.
Dr. White Knight?
Yeah, there's a lot wrong with Dr. Futurity. So if you want to beat up and pick on one of those sci-fi books from that era, beat up on Dr. Futurity and leave poor Vulcan's Hammer alone. But
just the whole Native American thing is just terrible.
In Dr. Futurity.
In Dr. Futurity.
Yeah. Yeah. So but the point is that he was gearing up he had already, I think when he wrote The Man Whose Teeth Were Alike, he like knew he had to do the Vulcan's Hammer edits, and that was coming up. But really, and this is the intersection that it has with Unfinished PKD, which is the book I just finished writing. And there's a chapter about the lost mainstream novels in my book, and that I'm basically quoting from my own book in this part of my notes from the thing, because a lot of what we know about the process of how this book happened comes from the process of which there was a editor at Harcourt Brace, which is a major publisher, named Eleanor Dimoff. And Eleanor Dimoff was the almost editor of a lot of these mainstream novels. But what she kept doing was stringing Phil along for 5 years, saying, I want to publish your books, but they're not quite ready. And she kept sending them back. Now, I tried to get more information about Eleanor Dimoff, and I thought if I Googled Eleanor Dimoff, there wouldn't be like a lot of people that had died with that name, because I knew she obviously wouldn't be with us. And I found her obituary, but there was one other woman with her name, and there was really nothing about this woman that I could find online.
That's too bad.
Yeah. And well, I know.
I mean, she was an editor at a major publisher. It would seem like she would have more of a legacy.
Exactly. And it's funny because if you Google her, she comes up in Lord Runningclam's notes for Pink Beam, and that's pretty much it. And although she was a major publisher, or she was a major editor at the time for a major publisher, and she worked apparently within the mainstream literary realm, and Phil was very excited, according to letters, to have her attention. Like, she had enough notoriety that Phil was excited to work with her, to the point where he even considered going to New York to work directly with her on some of these books. But then the idea of making the trip, just freaked him out too much, and he didn't go. And there was one book that he worked on right after finishing The Man Who Japed, called A Time for George Stavros. And this was a manuscript that was received at SMLA on October 17th, 1955, very quickly after The Man Who Japed was turned in. And this was one of the longer attempts at a mainstream novel, and apparently the one that Eleanor Dimoff put a lot of energy into, sending Phil several letters about it. And it's one that you will never see published because the manuscript was lost along the way. However, it's A Time for George Stavros was important because it was the one that Dimoff put the most energy into. She was trying very hard to get this one into publishing shape. And at one time or another, 5 different novels came across her desk from Phil, all mainstream novels. Okay. And one of the most important ones was borderline science fiction, and that's called Nicholas and the Higgs. And that's the one of the lost novels where the manuscript was lost that most makes me want to pull my hair out, because it actually sounds pretty awesome.
Really?
Because even though he sent it to this editor who was...
And trust me, it would not be called that when it came out.
Right. And there are themes and little sci-fi ideas that would later make it into other novels. And if you want more details on that, you're going to have to read Unfinished PKD, because I spent a lot of time on that. But that's not what we're talking about today. But Nicholas and the Higgs was Phil's also, it was a doorstop novel. It was super fucking long. It was one of the longest things that Phil ever wrote. It was lost. And Time for George Stavros and Nicholas and the Higgs were the ones that Dimoff put the most energy into. However, this relates to the man whose teeth are all alike because the genesis of this was after dancing around 5 books, Dimoff said, "You're almost there, basically. We're gonna work together on some of this stuff." And when he sat down to write The Man Whose Teeth Were All Alike, he was convinced that this was the one that Dimoff was going to do, right? So he talked often about how his 50s science fiction was written with the eyes of Don Wollheim in mind, like he was writing to, I gotta sell to Don Wollheim. He
Right.
wrote this book thinking Eleanor Dimoff is going to buy this book. Okay. So that is one of the reasons why she's important. As far as the 5 novels, we also know that Teeth was one of the few books that he didn't even send it to SMLA. He sent it directly to her. Okay. Which is interesting. And by the way, as far as I can tell, that annoyed SMLA that he sent it straight to her. But she rejected it pretty simply. And there's a quote. Did you want to
Good
read
for
the?
her. Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
And
want me to
there's
read that quote?
yeah, at some point,
Sure.
yeah. This is Dimoff talking.
Very short. At some point, the relationships between Phil's couples become so crystallized into a nasty, inhuman quarreling, or such a dead end, that somehow the characters become interesting only in a clinical way.
Yeah.
And that's a fair assessment. And I frankly, well, we'll get into it in a bit.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of talk here about.
Right. And Phil thought that the only thing that he ever said about Teeth that we know of is that he thought it was a fusion of Nathaniel West and F. Scott Fitzgerald. And he compared the character of Leo Runcible, which of course is a name he recycled for Ubik, the last name Runcible.
Well, isn't it Runciter, Glenn Runciter, and Leo Bolero?
Right. However, if you researched the outlines for Ubik like this guy has, you know that throughout the entire outline, Glenn Runciter is called Glenn Runcible in the
which
outline.
is the way it's listed in the cast of characters of Ubik is Runcible.
Yeah.
Which threw me off when we actually did the book.
Right. So Runcible, Runciter, I don't know why that name, whatever, like why he changed it, but throughout all the outlines, the name Runcible came back up. Yeah. So anyways, not everyone would notice that. That's a deep cut nerd thing. But as soon as I saw Leo Runcible, and that's the thing is a lot of these novels that he didn't plan or he thought were not going to get published, like We Can Build You. That's why we have Priss. And a lot of people try to connect Priss and We Can Build You to the Priss and Do Androids Dream, but it's really just an accident because it was a book that when he did Do Androids Dream, he had given up on We Can Build You. And then later on, somebody was like, no, I will publish that, right? And then he just kept the name. And with Teeth, I think, some of the names, yeah, and you're right. Leo Bolero was a character of Three Stigmata and Runcible.
He repeats names all the time.
Right, which is why
I think you're right. It's not intentional. It's not meant as a nod to something. It's a strictly case-to-case basis where he's like, oh, this isn't getting published, but I like that name, so I'm going to use it here.
And it could be too that because I do this, he's going along writing, at rapid rate often, and uses a name as a placeholder, and like, maybe I'll go back and change that later, and then doesn't.
But then doesn't, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know anyone who does that, including every writer who's ever lived.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody's done that. So, and that character, according to Ann Dick's biography, Leo Runcible was based on a neighbor named Adolf Ako, AKO. was a local realtor, and he had been the captain of an Israeli ship during the War of Liberation that ran the British blockade, which is actually really interesting, and why he didn't use that in his character, I don't know. And it says, Oko's wife, Gladys, was a sweet, pretty, somewhat vague woman who drank a lot, according to Anne. Phil created the not very sympathetic picture of them as the Runceballs and the man whose teeth were alike. And in this book, he recounted some of the terrible sacrilegious Easter egg jokes that Captain Oko liked to tell. According to Anne Dick, and that's page 42 of The Search for Philip K. Dick by Anne Dick. And
I have that book.
yeah, too. I think we all do. And so, yeah, I thought that was interesting. He specifically based Leo Runcible off one of the neighbors. And so the original idea was that Anne and Phil had this argument. Okay, Larry had to prove that he has it. Okay. We're complete now.
Right? Everybody has their correct materials in front of them.
Yes, turn to page 42. That's where you have your teeth.
Turn to page 42 in your textbooks.
Yeah. So the original inspiration was some kind of debate where Anne and Phil were arguing whether Neanderthal man was vegetarian or not. I think I'm on Anne's side here, but that could be the vegan in me. However, they had this like argument.
They had hunting tools. They were not vegetarian.
You can be with Phil. I can be on team Anne here. But look, regardless of whoever won the argument, the whole beginning idea of this novel was this argument, which is really kind of funny. I
mean, we're itching to go, so get through it.
Okay, producing a trade. Okay, so Mark, we already talked about Zizing doing the publishing the trade paperback or trade paperback edition, limited hardback in June of 1984, and then the European the Galanche paperback happened in 88. I don't know if Vintage did Vintage do the mainstream novels? I don't think that they did.
I don't know if they did.
Just Crap Artist. That was the only one, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But that was published during his lifetime, so that makes sense.
Right. And then so that's the writing and publication history of the man whose teeth were all alike.
Exactly alike.
Did you mention who Leo Runcible's based on?
Yeah.
Okay.
That
was all he talked about. What are you talking about?
No, the civic-minded man. That thing. I must have.
Yeah. He was.
Okay. I blanked out.
We'll talk more about that when we get into the themes.
He did. So Dick is supposed to be the rapist, huh?
No, I don't know. Well, we'll get to that part. And
no, well, you're talking about the publication history. You mentioned the Runcible character, but you didn't mention the what's his face?
D'Ambrosio.
D'Ambrosio.
Yeah.
The angry. Yeah, no, I think he's mentioned. Hold on, let me look at that. He was.
This is basically a story of two men, but.
And the women they subjugate.
Yeah.
Pete and Joan Stevens were neighbors that came over for drinks, and I think
that's who it was based on.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with the drunk and the not being out, having the wife drive him to work, was a neighbor named Pete and Joan Stevens. So, according to, but I mean, there's all kinds of details here on the like in Anne's book. She talks about like some of the little details about how they would go to Lions Club meetings and stuff like that. So I think that's how they interacted with that. But no, Phil,
Lions clubs would be so much better if they were called donkey clubs, I think.
even though Anne and Phil's argument is put into other characters in this story, I don't think he was basing their relationship into any of these characters because
Really?
he already did that in Confessions of a Crap Artist
When did he write Crap Artist?
right before this. So he had just
Okay, so
written.
that's why there's so many similarities between this and Crap Artist.
Well, yeah, and also because they're about Marin County and that
Yeah.
time there. And this is right when he moved there. And he's in the honeymoon period with Anne, where he was excited to be married to her. She
but he
was still accidentally.
portrays her as a total bitch for some reason.
Well, he hadn't started doing that yet. And this was still, I mean, this was still the phase where Anne was still like accidentally calling Phil by her dead husband's name at parties from time to time. Like,
So you don't think he based the D'Ambrosios on him and Anne?
no, I don't think so. Well,
Because I mean, to me, all four of these characters are the characters in Crap Artist. You know, the wife that gets tossed away, the young kid that ends up, taking over for the old guy. It's a different story, obviously, but it seems like they're all sort of the same.
And you're going to
let's
find.
get into that in themes, but before we do that,
sorry, jumping the gun.
Do that. You know what time it is?
Everybody goes to pee
and get water. Well, you do.
Well, breaking it down.
All right, Larry, tell us what the story's about while we go pee and get water.
Yes.
Fuck you. Let's get into it. We start with Walter D'Ambrosio, who's how would you describe him? He's sort of an everyman to begin with. He has fears. He's sort of the sad sack character that we see in a lot of Dick books. But in this case, he's married to a stunningly beautiful upper class woman who he got for some reason. We don't know how that happened or why that happened. We're never told. But he is super insecure, like clinically. There's something wrong with this dude. Then we meet Leo Runcible, who is a dick. He's just a dick from the first beat to the last beat. He is a cock. He is what we in the business call an asshole. And so these two guys butt heads because D'Ambrosio invites his acquaintance from the auto shop to his house for dinner. No big deal there, but he's a black guy in 1955 or whatever, whenever this is set, in Marin County, which is not really known for it being much of a melting pot.
Oh, especially at the time.
Especially at the time, and especially in that specific area. And so he invites him to dinner. That seems everything's copacetic. But then Runcible has a friend of his over who he's trying to sell stuff to. And the guy says, "Hey, I saw a black guy at your neighbor's house. Are black people living in this neighborhood?" And so Runcible, who we don't know why, but he flips out. He's trying to be this idealist, but he's also a hardcore capitalist. So he's confronted with these two things that don't match. You can't be an idealist and a hardcore capitalist. That doesn't work. So
I think Phil was commenting on his neighbor who was like kind of lionized in the hood as like this guy who was fighting the good fight for their water bills, and at the same time I think Phil thought he was a dick when everybody else in the area thought he was like the bee's knees. So
Well,
I think that's
to me that's a great portrayal of someone with conflicting views inside themselves. You know, how do you be an idealist and a capitalist at the same time? It doesn't work. So he yells at this friend, tells him to get out, in a great scene where he's like, "Oh, yeah, there might even be Jews here. I don't know." And Runcible is Jewish. So he's like, "Well, what if there are Jews in this neighborhood? What, should we just shut down the entire neighborhood and everybody get fucking hung? Who knows?" And so he kicks this dude out and his wife, and they're like the generic white couple of the 50s who are like, "We're not racist, but do you have black people living here?" After he kicks this guy out, the capitalist kicks back in. And he says, "Well, someone has to be to blame for this. And it certainly isn't me, because I'm a good guy and I know it. So it has to be the guy that had the black guy over for dinner." And so he starts this little neighborhood war with D'Ambrosio. And then D'Ambrosio, who is, as I said, totally insecure, has problems with his wife. She wants to have a job. His boss is like, "Yeah, I'm going to give her a job because she's cool." And D'Ambrosio's like, "What? A woman working? That makes no sense. She needs to be at home because then I'm less of a man somehow." And so he gets drunk at a bar, you know, as you did in the 50s. You drive wherever, whenever. Drunk driving wasn't actually a real crime back then. It was a just get home kind of crime, you know.
well, they took his license.
But they did take his license. So and Marin was the first place to outlaw gas-powered blowers. So it's always been ahead of its time in passing laws. It also was the first place to pass anti-smoking on the street laws. So
Facts. The more you know.
he sort of gets stuck in a ditch right next to Runcible's house. Runcible knows the car, knows who's driving it, is pissed at this guy, so he calls the cops and says, "There's a drunk driver running over children. You got to arrest him right away." And so then everything happens. There's some shit with stuff that most of you would have no idea what they're talking about when they're talking about leach fields and stuff like that. Anyway, so he's got his wife took the reins on this and is getting their system fixed. And what we think is that there's some ancient, you know, Indian artifacts that are found on his land, and that, you know, running up the hill to Runcible's house is this burial mound that is supposed to have all this shit in it. Later, we find out that D'Ambrosio, in one of his rare clever moments, which doesn't honestly make any sense that he would be a practical joker when he has no personality at all. He has played this practical joke on Runcible by burying a bunch of stuff and creating a skull that has that looks like it's a Neanderthal. So he does that, and then of course Runcible, being the cock ass that he is, he's like, "Well, I can't be wrong. So it has to be legitimate because I called the newspapers and I said it's legitimate, so therefore it's legitimate no matter what." And so then the story goes on, stuff happens, there's a rape that is bad. And then by the end, the rapist has a child and is happy. Runcible is the owner of the water company. There were some deformed people in the middle there somewhere. And I walked away from this like, well, I feel like I've wasted many hours of my life reading this book.
So both of you guys didn't like this.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but yes.
Yeah.
The rationalizations in this were incredible. Like the way he weaves the characters, the way he turns them into their rationalizations from self-loathing to it's somebody else's fault is amazing. He does that like almost every other page.
And it's back and forth.
Yeah,
It
to me
never
that
fits.
was what kept me reading
Yep.
was this rationalization and the like Runtable in the car. He's all about finding out what's the truth. And then once they go to the poor part of town, he's like, fuck this, I'm out. It's just like it just has had enough because there's no longer any benefit for him. But he looks at it like, okay, this is now a civic thing that I'm doing. It's just the way it's I don't know anybody else that has written this kind of circular rationalization like this, and so realistic. That's the praise I have for this book. that specific element.
Well, before I get into the themes, I will give a thumbnail of where I'm going with this, which is as a Phil Dickian, the curiosity of how this connects to his life and what it says or comments on a period of his life made it interesting for me. But if I'm being honest, and I'm rating this book as a reading experience for anyone who isn't an uber nerd, like overly invested in this guy's life, then I have to look at it differently, because my interest in what it says about his Marin County days and how this was written in his like honeymoon period with living north of the bay is all my curiosity for it. And there are weird things where he's transferring this debate that he had that inspired it with his wife between two characters who he picked randomly, basically out of the, kind of network of people that lived in this neighborhood. He took inspiration from two different couples, and then he took the two guys and put them into this argument that he was having. And that's interesting, right? That's interesting. But as far as the themes go, the themes that I have are Marin County and married life, characters, wackadoo science, and Philness and experimental writing. Because
We haven't talked about wackadoo science in a while.
I know, but this one definitely has a little bit of wackadoo. Little bits of wackadoo.
Actually, it's I thought the science was pretty sound in this one, but I'm curious what you have to
Well,
say.
just when Phil talks about science, it gets wackadooey, even if like he's basing it on wackadooey. But initial thoughts,
New
Professor
favorite
Wilson.
word, wackadooey.
So I'll be concise now, but
We'll get deeper into it as we go.
I liked it. First of all, it's a work of horror and absurdism for me. Horror in terms of the racism and misogyny and all of that stuff. But so I think in some ways effectively rendered.
It is horrifying.
Yeah.
That is for sure.
And I was actually kind of horrified too in that, like during the rape scene, like I'd never seen, because I'm not used to that, and at least that sort of, and geez, it could have been way more graphic than that, but from what I expect from PKD's writing, I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, though, for me, it's a work of absurdism, but that's not what he was trying to do. Really, the sense I got from the first 100 pages was that, okay, he is really making an effort to populate this suburb and effectively represent gender relations and just the relationships between the people in that community.
Yeah.
In a very concerted way, and frankly, did kind of a good job at it. I was really impressed. I think that's really what you saw in it.
I was, I mean, again, I go to the Town in the City. Is that this felt to me like Dick's Town in the City for the, first 75 pages or whatever it is, where he's, I mean, it's an honest description of like small town life in Marin County.
And literally populating it with different characters. We have our core characters who he develops, but then, other characters,
real people all around.
And
it even starts that way. It starts with the plumber, talking to the school teacher. I mean,
absolutely,
it's like a classic, working stiff talking to a working stiff, and they're discussing just bullshit.
And it's suburban stereotypes that moves into this kind of, I mentioned this, I think, in our messages. It's like a Lifetime channel kind of thing, soap opera or something that he's really trying to unfold. Yeah.
But then, just like a Lifetime special or movie, it veers off into the, like you say, absurd.
Yeah.
It's over the top. Like, all of a sudden, everybody is just the worst possible human being you can think of. Everybody.
And I knew this wasn't going to happen, but what I wanted in the end was an actual Neanderthal to in some way, rise up out of a fucking cave and start, like, as a metaphor for everybody's horrible psyches.
You have to read the Simulacra, and then you get your Neanderthals in Northern.
Right. Anyway, those are just a few preliminary comments. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because I think one of the reasons why the rape scene is so shocking, beyond the fact that rape is horrible, but is Phil doesn't do a lot of kinky writing in his stuff.
Well, and he's terrible at writing sex in any form.
Well, and the scene starts off as breakup sex, basically, right? And it starts off...
It's makeup sex. It's not
makeup sex, yeah. And then it starts off a little steamy, but then it goes the other direction so fast from...
But, I mean, it's perfectly realistic.
Yep.
I think that's the scariest part about it.
Yes.
Is that it's not a production.
Yeah.
He didn't like build it up. It just like, this is happening.
And you know what it reminded me of specifically?
Animalists.
Arnold's The Divine Madness of Philip K. Dick, where he was describing Phil himself acting that way, like, abusing his spouse. I forgot which ones.
But see, David, that's why I'm saying that there's a lot more Dick in that D'Ambrosio character than
I felt a lot of PKD in that character.
Like he describes abuse the way an abuser would describe abuse. Like it's founded, like there's a reason for it, but there is no reason behind it. He's like, no, she's causing this, not me. That to me sounds like someone
she wants me to feel terrible.
Their abuse.
She wants me to feel terrible because she's got a job and I can't. She wants me to feel like I can't support her. And one of the reasons why I didn't feel like that was so Phil is I was looking purely. I see now what you're saying, but I was looking at it purely from like he obviously based the characteristics of this guy's life on other people, but there's a certain degree,
not the emotional,
right? So we're both right in a sense, but like the thing about it is that Phil often, there's aspects of Phil in all of his characters, which is one of the reasons that makes Clan of the Alphine Moon so hilarious. It's because there are certain aspects of Phil in everybody, but I think.
Well, but in D'Ambrosio, it was mainly in terms of his neuroses. I got I shouldn't say PKD himself, but the way in which invariably PKD has been represented. I was very much.
It just felt like it felt too real to be imagined. I hate to say that because I believe in imagination implicitly, right. but there was a certain realness to the emotions that D'Ambrosio shows,
yep.
or thinks about, that it just felt like it had to be personal experience. But hell, who knows? Maybe he is that good of a writer, you know?
Well, yeah. So let's start off with let's start off with a little bit of the Marin County
Corinne, you got it.
Aspects. I mean, I think
they're very sensitive. If you say San Rafael up there, you're gonna get yelled at. It's like if you call Houston Street in New York, you call it Houston Street, you're gonna get yelled at.
Yeah.
And
There's
Cooch in Portland.
Yeah, I was about to say couch in Portland. Yeah. Cooch. Yeah.
You say Cooch?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you say couch, they're like, "Oh, you're from somewhere else."
Hey, I have a random question for you guys. And this I was thinking about it actually reading this book. So in Midwest, and you know this, it's tennis shoes, right? Out east, it's sneakers, and here it's also pop. That's what made me think of it. Dick used pop to refer to soda. It's soda out east. What is soda called in California? What do you got? Is it soda?
Yeah.
But here, when I was growing up, I called it pop. But Dick,
my sister's from San Diego, but she lives in Virginia, and she calls it pop, and I hate it.
Yeah.
That's a Midwesternism, though, isn't it?
It's a lot of places call it pop.
Oh, okay, all right.
But and it's not exclusive to the Midwest.
Got it.
But it's about equal pop and soda. And sneakers, we call them tennis shoes here.
Yeah, that's what we do here. Yeah.
Yeah, and other places call them sneakers, and in England, what do they call them? They call them trainers.
I should know that. I can't remember.
It's trainers.
Is it?
Yep.
So I think it's curious that Phil opened with the water issues in the book, like on the very first and second page, right? And I think what he was trying to do is draw a contrast to living in the city, like that. Like I think right from the bat, like I think this was a thing he noticed. Like this is just not an issue I dealt with living in Berkeley, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so moving out to Marin County, like in 1959, originally with Cleo, this was the first time that Phil had lived outside of Berkeley, outside of that 1935 in Washington, D.C., which he was mostly too young to remember, or remember very little of. And of course, which inspired Now Wait for Last Year with the W35 version.
One of my favorites, by the way.
Yeah, I know. You're the Now Wait for Last Year stan.
I really like that novel too. I remember.
Yeah. So, but he, that year in DC was the only year he had ever lived outside of Berkeley, and of course the boarding school in Ojai for a little bit, but he didn't really have a lot of experience living in the countryside. So this was, a very big change.
Well, I can relate to that because I split my time between Oroville, California, and San Diego. Oroville is dead country. I mean, the last time I talked to my dad was in 1998. And he said, Oroville just got a supermarket. That's how small Oroville was.
Right.
It didn't even have a supermarket until 1998. So it was, so when I moved to New York, and I moved to the country in New York, upstate, as they say, but upstate is everything except the city. So, but I lived in a place where we did have, septic, and there was no garbage service. We had well water. all that stuff. So I lived basically what Phil's talking about here is like just having to adjust to all these simple changes, things that you took for granted being a city dweller, and now you have to pay attention to.
Right.
It was very different.
And he's doing this through the eyes of the Runspools initially. And I think most importantly on page 19, I think there's a lot of really good world building details about where he uses the ads that Runspool runs in the San Rafael paper. And the fact that people are moving there, and specifically there's a line where he talks about, but the roads were improving and so were the cars. More and more people were moving to Marin County. Each month, the large towns had already become overcrowded and property prices were going up. But, he talks about how nice the trees are. But I think I think this little section does a really good job of, which is funny because he might not have thought of it as world building just because he's writing about the scenario of where he is. But when you're reading the book 80 years on, it's important, the world building, to setting the stage for what Marin County was like.
Well, he was in a very. I also lived in Marin County, but he lived on the coastal side. I lived right off the 101, so I was in Novato, which is barely mentioned in the book, but they talk about the Novato Bank. But San Rafael is the big town, and it's not even a big town. Right. And I can imagine in the 50s, it was hardly like, it wasn't San Francisco North or anything like that. It was,
And San Rafael is where he was living when all the Scanner Darkly shit went down. So
was he living in San Rafael? I thought he always lived over on the coastal side.
Well, his address was San Rafael. Let's say that. He may have been living more towards the coast, but his address is technically, which is not a big place. I mean, my curiosity with it is putting in his addresses to Google Maps and then looking around on Google Street View. So I don't know a ton about it. I've seen all the Berkeley houses. I haven't been to the North County ones. So.
Hey, can I just real quick? I hadn't thought about this until you brought it up, but the theme of water, foregrounding it at the beginning, subtextually, symbolically, or whatever you want to say, works really well because if you think about, he's introducing everything like we were talking about earlier, he's populating the suburb. Of course, it turns out that the water's toxic, right? Like the people that live there. And then it also, seriously, and then it sets him up for, in the end, Runcible, doesn't he buy because it's toxic?
Buys the water company.
Buys the water company. So he can look like a good guy at the expense of his bank account. Yeah.
Yeah. That to me was, he's a terrible person, right?
He's talk about clinical people. He's a clinical narcissist for sure.
Yeah. But the way he treats his wife, you can see he's a narcissist.
Yeah.
But that whole idea that he's an idealist and a capitalist at the same time really was one of the finer points that I liked about this book. How do you reconcile those two things in your head? You can't be all about the money and care about the culture at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't fit. It's like it's oil and water. It just doesn't mix.
And what's interesting is that the real life guy had this kind of Israeli war hero history kind of thing going on. And the fact that he didn't include that, I almost think is might, to some people at the time, might have made him more sympathetic or I don't know, but it would have made him a more interesting character if he had this.
I did time with a guy that was in the Israeli army. He was
really
intense.
You guys are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a really nice guy because he was drunk, and but he was really intense at times.
Yeah, and it says here that Anne said that Pete and Joan Stevens, who he mostly based the DeBrassios off of, that their children still live in the area when she wrote this book. And it says here that Pete lives in the Bay Area and was very amused to find out that he had become a character in a Philip K. Dick book. And apparently one of the characters in Zapgun is also based on this character, according to Anne.
He was amused?
So because he was he was an inventor. He that was one of his things is he was.
Okay, so that fits with the
Zapgun.
Well, and fits with D'Ambrosio being a.
He's a packaging designer, isn't he?
But highly skilled, apparently. I mean, if I could give him one prop, it would be that D'Ambrosio seemed like he was highly skilled.
I couldn't tell though. Sherry, of course, wanted his job and kind of got it. Although I don't know if she became part of creative, because initially his boss.
She said she was getting more of that stuff.
That's right. That's
also,
right.
sort of pissed him off. He was like, I don't know. He is so shallow in that context.
Yeah, and there are a lot of details about these characters in Anne Dick's book. Definitely the 42 through 44 of this book has a lot of details about the neighbors and the people in the area. And it's interesting here. It says that she's just talking about certain neighbors, and for example, the gym teacher at the elementary school where Anne's daughters went to school, had gone to elementary school with Phil in Berkeley, and so it's just some interesting things about
cool.
neighbors in the neighborhood.
Well, go ahead, David.
Yeah, and so the next thing that I think is when you get into the characters is when you get into kind of the racism in the area at the time, which is the next real thing that I have. And I know Professor Wilson also already commented on kind of how horrible the racism is, but it's a key part to the beginning of the book because D'Ambrosio has the black mechanic over, and then Runcible being Jewish, but worried about you get into this whole scene on page 45 where they're basically throw it back at Runcible.
David.
Yes.
When was Israel established? 49? Was it 49 or 59?
48, 49. Yeah.
48, 49. Okay.
Yeah.
So Israel is still a new place.
10 years old, yes, at this point. Yeah. 10, 11 years old.
When he wrote it, yeah.
Yeah.
But when it takes place is 55, right?
He doesn't really say the year. I think he's just thinking of it as contemporary. I think so. I always think of it as 60, but but yeah, with the racism involved here, I think the most fundamental scene where it really talks about it, page 45 of the launch edition. I want to know why you doubt it. Don't tell me. Oh, wait, here. I can swear to you that this is a really good place to bring up your kids. Nobody here would have Negroes visiting them, and if anybody sold to Negroes, then he broke off, winded, his heart labored. The same goes for Jews. You won't find any Jews here to dirty up your streets. I'll tell you what. Why don't you move here? They stared at him speechlessly, and then Runcible responds. This is Paul, I guess, talking. And then he says, "Are you a Nazi? You want to start up Dachau again or something?"
No, he's flying. I mean, you read it calmly, but he's flying off the handle at that point.
Yeah.
He's like, no, there's no Jews either. No one here to dirty up your fucking streets.
Yeah.
He's
And
really animated at that point.
so it's funny because he made a
big.
big deal earlier, and this is where you're talking about the circular thing. He made a big deal earlier about
How
the
important it was that he gets his
yeah,
buddy.
he made a big deal about the black mechanic being there, but then he's like, no, don't, then he kind of confronts the racism. So I think it is an interesting character thing because a lot of times, um, now I can see it as somebody who's taken notes from editors. A lot of editors would be like, well, what does he really think? Well, let's be clear here,
He thinks
and I could see an editor
thinks all
saying,
those things.
yeah, I could see an editor very clearly
Yeah.
telling a writer, like, well, he's not, well, what does he really think? Let's be more clear here. Right.
But that would, the whole point is that he's trapped in those two viewpoints. He's trapped between those two and they vacillate.
Wait, who's trapped?
Runcible.
Runcible. Okay, I didn't know if you meant him or PKD. Because my question is,
I'm sure PKD is too.
He's clearly trying to do something here with race, right? It's there from beginning to end. You can't get by 10 pages without him trying to put some sort of a racist thing in there. But in terms of representing these stereotypes, right?
Yeah, he's
different characters.
I mean,
but it's like
Dick is sort of an asshole in himself, but he really had progressive viewpoints on what society should be, as far as everyone being free to do their own thing and all that stuff, and no racism. But he never could reconcile himself to, in his personal life, treating women as equals and stuff like that. So he himself was trapped in a cycle of insecurity and violence and
sure.
And probably we all have thoughts. At least I assume we all have thoughts that are not good, somewhat racist, somewhat prejudiced in some way. At some point, we think something bad.
And culture inscribes us all with
but we don't. It's whether you act on that matters. And I think Dick took the thoughts as actions. So he had a certain self-loathing just by having thoughts of racism and stuff like that. And so
it's almost as if he's in this book he's like trying to because I've never seen him harp on race so much as in this book.
Well, he does in what's the one with the black president?
Flow My Tears. He does a little bit, right? But
and Counterclock World, too.
Oh, Counterclock World. Oh, yeah, with the black bishop.
Yeah. I mean, he did it several times in different things. And if you really think about it, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is very much
but it's not this direct.
It's more metaphorical in Android.
It's more metaphorical, yes. And then, and really, you see too, and it's funny, Larry, because I think you're right about the back and forth, and I didn't really see it in my first reading of this, but that is really a huge part of it, and a lot of it's through Janet as well. When Janet's trying to defend her husband,
Who, honestly, I mean, I think she hates it.
Yeah, but she's like, hey, we did the right thing,
Well, she does have the best rationalization in the whole book. When she starts out oh, I'm such a bad person. I feel all this guilt about, getting my husband in trouble. And then she goes to, well, it's not my fault. And then she goes back to, oh my God, it all is my fault. And she's crying and changing her shirt and forgetting to put on a shirt and stuff like that. It's just, that scene is incredible with her just all over the place emotionally, but rationalizing everything as she goes.
And both Janet and Sherry fall in the line at the end, though, don't they?
Yeah, which is probably the worst. I mean,
it's definitely
the worst emotional thing that I could have suffered. Is there's he leaves it in such a the book ends in such a sorry state.
It does. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, he's trying to construct a critique of let's limit it to racism and misogyny. How about? And racism and misogyny kind of win in the end. And you could take the message away is that there's no way out of this shit.
Yeah.
You know? So it's pretty bleak.
Dark. Yeah. It's very dark.
Yeah, and I know Lord Running Plan referred to this book as the darkest of the mainstream novels. And I think what he was talking about is the fact that, like, it's a really bitter book. Like, there's no, like, happy or amusing moments in this book. Really, it's just a lot of, like...
There are some amusing moments, but not...
I find bickering very funny. There's all kinds of bickering from beginning to end. So,
And there's some triumph in the middle, when the wife when Sherry gets the job, and she's doing well, and her whole thing about abortion I thought was amazing. Especially in a time when abortion was illegal, she's like, "Fuck this! I'm not having a kid."
Yeah, and I gotta say that when she stands up to to her husband in this book. And I had a thought about, I have an aunt who I had this really kind of sad conversation with her one time where she was talking about how, she grew up in a time where she felt like she wasn't supposed to go to college. She was just supposed to learn to type, and because she grew up in Minnesota and, and she was talking about how just, because she was my mom's twin sister, and then,
really?
My mom's twin sister, and then they had my Aunt Peggy was 12 years younger than them, and my aunt was telling me just that 12-year difference and how much expectations there were for you get a husband, you go to college just to learn secretarial, and that she had these expectations that were expected of her. So I was thinking about that during a lot of this book when I was seeing, D'Ambrosio's wife. I think her name was Sherry. Was Sherry, right? Yeah, Sherry's standing up and saying, like, and it's on page 91. You must be terribly insecure about your masculinity if my getting a temporary job threatens you. You must feel that you're failing in some basic vital way. And, like, this whole argument where he's like, she's telling him, like, you're just being insecure, and then he just gets more insecure, like, and digs himself deeper of a hole. But for me, I did think that this was pretty progressive at the time to have this woman, like, stand up to her husband.
But that's probably because Anne was progressive like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was very, very much doing her own thing.
Well, and Sherry's kind of the sharpest character.
He is definitely. And now think of it this way. Think of D'Ambrosio being correct in his ideas about his wife, that she does have a plan, that she is thinking ahead, that these are all planned attacks on her part. Because, I mean, I read it as if he was insane to think these things. But looking back on it, she does have that sort of mental acuity. I mean, she's super smart, and she does look ahead, and she knows what she has to get done. That argument on the porch, where she's like, this argument isn't about whatever you're talking about. It's about this thing. And she's just guiding him in certain ways. I mean, she really is super manipulative and intelligent, whereas he's just a bro.
And she's particularly articulate with respect to his shortcomings.
Yeah.
She calls him out on it all the time.
Yeah.
One of the funniest moments in relation to them too is page 142. What has happened, she decided, is the whole structure of the family has broken down since World War II. Now, this is a common conservative, argument, but in World War II, women started
That's Janet, right?
started welding in war plants like men, and communism
That's
has done the
Janet.
same thing
Mhm.
as the war. Sherry D'Ambrosio should not be out earning a living because that is a man's job.
That's
Um,
that's the part. That's
yeah,
where she does that whole like logic train that leads her to being the good guy.
right. And so I love this part where he says, and this is like an internal monologue for this character at this point.
Yeah.
But it says, in some ways, the D'Ambrosios are communists, she realized. This is, I think, Janet thinking
Yeah.
this.
Janet.
Yeah, Janet says, in some ways, the D'Ambrosios are communists, she realized. That Negro they had visit them and consider that interracial marriage is part of the communist program for America. So Janet just goes full on, they're communists
Yeah. Yeah.
because she got a job and was like, the one working, wearing the pants in the family kind of thing.
And on that page, David, I actually have a
But
sentence underlined that functions as one of the theses of this novel, and it's this: what has happened, she decided, is that the whole structure of the family has broken down since World War II,
yeah.
and that's kind of what PKD seems to be unfolding here.
But the whole thing is about her alleviating her own guilt for what her husband has done. That's the whole point of calling them communists in the end, is that she's absolving her and her husband of blame.
Janet and Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Janet's just like, well, it can't be our fault because they're communists.
And by the way, you know what pisses Leo off initially about D'Ambrosio is he fucked up a deal for him. Those people that came over to his house, because he's a real estate agent, right?
But he didn't. But D'Ambrosio didn't even fuck it up. Leo.
Well, no, he convinced himself because he got mad about the race thing.
Yeah.
So he blamed it. You're absolutely right. He blamed it on D'Ambrosio, even though, he didn't do anything but have that guy over for dinner. Yeah.
The entire book is a series of rationalizations.
Yep. And miscommunications too.
Right.
Yeah.
The fact that neither guy will talk to the other is absolutely like people nowadays wouldn't even stand for that. We'd be like, well, you have a problem with this person, just discuss it. Why wouldn't you discuss it with that guy? But the pride of the 50s was something that I don't even think we understand. Like, as a man, you had a specific job to do. You were not the master of your destiny. You were assigned a role at birth. You make a living. You support a wife. You have children. That is what you do in American society. It wasn't like, what is your dream? Live out your dream. It didn't have anything to do with that.
And that's why it's such
a practical societal role that you had to play.
And that's why there's really little to grab onto this book unless you are reading it in the context of when it was written, right?
Yeah.
You have to, with this book, you have to look at it through those eyes, because there are certain books like
it's a period piece. I mean,
well, like for example, I Am Legend is a book. You don't have to think about what year. It could take place anytime. It doesn't matter. It could still be the future, and it still holds up, right? Whereas like this book, or I guess let's think it like
there are pockets of American society that would, consider this contemporary, but we don't generally associate those people.
But take, for example, Sherry asking for a divorce, basically saying I'm out of here, right?
Yeah.
That's not that big or radical of a thing if you're
Nowadays.
Now it isn't,
Yeah.
right? But then a woman in that area at that time
She had
in
no
marriage,
no legal right to divorce.
yeah. And for
She
her to
didn't even
say
have a
like
checkbook. Women didn't get checkbooks until the 70s. So
I know,
all those checks had to be signed by the husband.
well, and it's exactly right. Well, and so the context of this and what Phil was doing with having a character just say fuck this, like, and part of the thing too is that she liked her husband, like to a degree. She
So
thought he was an attractive guy. She wanted to fix it at first, but
okay, but
then she was,
here's the thing: is that Dick did not do a good job of explaining why these women are with these men.
yeah,
He did a terrible job of like, why is this rich society woman with this fucking bozo?
well, but there's
It
many
doesn't,
times in our
it's
lives
never explained.
where you've wondered to one side or another of a couple, like how
Yeah,
did
but
this person end
but
up
this
with
is a
this
novel,
bozo?
not this is a novel.
Yeah, and you know the
You could
thing,
explain that.
you could solve a few
Sure.
little backstories here and there. Could have solved that. I didn't think about
Yeah.
that. But you're right. Presumably, though, so I'm rereading Carrera's "I'm Alive and You Are Dead," and it
Okay.
close to the beginning of it, and he mentions this book by name, but he was kind of talking about his mainstream novels in general. Apparently, they were, while of course he had trouble publishing them. I'm not familiar with the popular landscape of mainstream novels, say in the 1950s, but these were a lot better, he says, than most of the shit that was out there, the popular stuff, according to
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Popular.
Yeah, and
Well,
more progressive, I guess.
yeah,
Well,
I can't say the 50s.
I,
I
I, I don't have a
really,
frame of reference for that.
I
yeah, I
mean,
don't have frame of reference because
if
I
you
just know what the
if you're talking
genre was
late
doing.
50s, you have you have Naked Lunch and you have the Beat Generation.
Well, that's not a
Very
popular
progressive.
mainstream novel, though.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. That's true.
So,
yeah.
and I
Grilling
and I really want to avoid talking about the really terrible scene in this book.
Yeah, you kind of scared me with that. We have to be careful.
Well, no, it is true because I think
I mean, I don't think there's anyone here that's going to say there's any value, any real merit uh, to that scene, other than it being stark reality.
yeah.
Well, it further develops his character in a darkly
But
and very negative way, you know?
it takes his character in a whole different direction.
Yeah.
I can appreciate a sad sack, but a sad sack rapist doesn't. I mean, it's Brock Turner all over again. Fuck that guy. You
Well,
know?
because
Oh,
what
go ahead.
happens in the scene is that they're kind of consoling each other and they're getting over like a lot of the bad things, and then he just keeps pushing too far and pushing too far, and
I mean,
I
the
think
intimacy. It starts as honest intimacy, but it, I mean, and honest passion as well. So honest intimacy, honest passion, but then as we all know, honest passion can has to be tempered with like like logic. You can't just be pure passion, you know.
Well, you
And
could, yeah.
what he does uh, is the antithesis of passion, because his sole goal was to get her pregnant. You know, we look at it as like they're doing this thing where he's playing with her breasts, and she wants to have sex, and she's coy about it, and but then it just turns on a dime. It's like, oh wow, they're this passionate couple all of a sudden after a fight, Like they're having the righteous makeup sex. All right, cool. But then it's like it becomes his own sort of plan of attack, like she's been doing to him the whole time. You know, if you look at it that way, he's now has his own plan of attack to ruin her. Like
he thinks that if she's
he
pregnant,
believes she's ruined him.
Yeah, that
So,
he can
yeah,
gain that. It's about control, and
it's about power. It's like
Yeah.
every time we hear about, you know, any sexual abuse, it's always about power. You know,
And there are no consequences for him either. You could, I mean, it functions as a pretty
no, it helps him. That's the word.
right. But it functions as for me anyway, as a critique of the ordinariness of domestic violence. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. It helps him, doesn't it?
Yeah.
which
It
is
gives
the
him
worst part. I
everything
think,
he wants.
which is why in my notes when I put I just wrote yikes by
Oh,
this
yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think this is like I pretty much took a star out of my rating because of everything that happens in relation to this. It's
Yeah.
not just the scene.
I did too. I mean,
But isn't the
definitely.
book, isn't it doing its work then if it evokes that sort of visceral response from you guys?
But
You know,
my problem is that there's
I
no
don't know.
consequences. There's no consequences for
It's
but that's the critique. I mean, there's no way out of this darkness, you know?
no, I see what you're saying, but it's
it's
the end-
ugly.
at the end.
Yeah.
There's no growth. There's no change in either good or bad, like emotionally, in any way.
Yeah, that's
Everything
right.
is status quo, right? From the
And
beginning of the book to the end of the book, it's all status quo. The
And
situation
that is the critique. We can't get
slightly.
out of this circle of despair or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's a brilliant.
Propelled by alpha masculinity. Seriously.
Yeah, but
Well,
it,
it's interesting.
but it doesn't feel good.
No,
It does
doesn't.
not feel good. No, and I do think he is
But
making
evocative, yes, it's evocative.
Yeah, and the writing itself, I mean, because I felt it like you guys did. That's why I was kind of impressed by this. I had not. That was a sort of side of PK
But it feels
that I haven't seen much.
Somehow it feels cheap. I think that's the thing that upsets me. You know,
Like-
I like
like he's going
a visceral response,
Yeah.
but somehow this one feels cheap.
How so?
All right.
Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
want to move the conversation on because I want to try to.
What you want to talk about something other than the book?
Rosier and
No,
Son.
No. I want to move on to. I want to
Let's talk about
finish talking about this book.
All right.
I would say the ugliest, one of the ugliest lines of dialogue in this book was there's a character that says on page 255, there's nothing more repulsive than a fat, ugly-looking pregnant woman. Some public relations, that would be like, and I was just like, I remember just
that whole thing there is
that whole thing
disturbing.
about like
his
where he's
joy,
getting
his
to the whole-
reveling in her despair is disgusting.
Yeah. And then she takes it in her own hands and takes care of the situation. And at least, you know, I think for the time being of when it was written, that's saying something. But I just remember reading that line and being like, whoa, it just stuck out as something that was, you know, really brutal. And I think when you
Personally, I think pregnancy is disgusting, but that's just a me thing.
well,
I know people that are actually
us people that
attracted to
don't
pregnancy.
like that don't ever want to have children, like it is a very different experience.
It's
So
disturbing.
I'll get into the Wackadooey stuff here real quick.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So on page 85, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out someday that Pilton's skull was fabricated by a clerical person bent on proving that all fossil remains were spurious. He hoped to get the pit down skull accepted by eminent scientific authorities of his day. Then he could spring it on the world that he had put it together in his attic. I think the concept that they would get this far, that people would like actually look at the skull and like think it was the real thing is kind of wackadooey to just in
They
general.
did. That's real. That happened.
That doesn't make it any less. Plenty of wackadooey stuff happens.
I mean, Piltdown Man is a real thing
Yeah.
that legitimately happened.
But wait, David, are you saying that you don't buy that these suburbanites are so interested in it? Is that?
Yeah, that's part of it. And I just think the whole thing with the skull, like it all just kind of skirts, even though I know it's based on real things, I think it just skirts a little bit of the, like when he's talking about the science of it, it just comes off feeling wackadooey to me. And especially in the context of this book. Like, but at the same time, like I found myself thinking in those moments, I almost wish he'd gone more wackadoo. And then like if a science fiction, a novel where he was allowing himself to go more surreal, like you were talking about, to me, it sounds more interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm anti wackadooey. I want more wackadooey. Go wackadooey.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
So this one is just, it just has too much. It's too real. There is no escapism here.
I don't know. I think this functions just like one of his science fiction novels in terms of world building. Yes, there is more attention to characterization. Yeah. Although, as you pointed
the whole
out,
thing is character. It's
but
not
more certain backstories would have enhanced it. Let's say, but he is. This is a lot. The theme of what is real and what isn't real. He plays with that in a variety of ways, including bringing the media into it when they come and start problematizing everything going on with that skull.
Oh, that phone call that he does to the Chronicle is one of my favorite parts.
Yeah,
I mean,
there is definitely a lot.
You talk about there being a lack of humor, but that was hilarious to me. He's like, "You can write whatever you want, but you won't have me to kick around anymore."
Like they're thinking of him, right?
Yeah, right. That whole narcissistic thing.
Really, absolutely.
Like right here.
And that's a common
center.
The Phil Dickian thing where, because I thought a lot of I always think of Regal Gum from Time Out of Joint.
Yeah.
For the narcissist. If the narcissist ceases to exist, well, of course, so does the whole world, right?
Right. That's narcissism that's founded. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That was a great reversal right there. I loved that one. Yep. It's like, oh, wait, if I do cease to exist, the world does cease to exist.
Of course.
Well, I do think he plays with the what is real pretty intensely in this book. And so that is definitely something that plays with the theme.
But he does it.
That's not necessarily
realistic.
Yeah. He does it in a realistic way because he has it's within the context of this story. It's the whole idea of is the skull real? Is the skull not? And it's funny because if you think of it in the terms of this started as this argument between him and Anne about whether Neanderthals were vegetarian or not. And then you move it into, he takes it into this whole what is real thing and this whole societal look at what started as this argument that they were having about this totally other thing has turned into this book about toxic masculinity and what is real and racism. And so he's doing a lot of things, and damn it, you're making me like this book more as I'm talking about it. Maybe I'll give it a star back.
No, it's a hard one because there are no really likable characters in it. Because basically, if you want to put it into exact terms, the evil wins in the end. It's hard to say that this is a good book. right? But maybe that's what makes it a good book, is that there are no likable people, and evil does win in the end. It's
But I mean, you mentioned Naked Lunch earlier. Are there? I
yeah,
love Naked Lunch. Are there any likable characters in
yeah,
that? Everybody's a son of a bitch in that
yeah,
book,
right.
including the monsters. Yeah,
So one thing that I did,
Well, I mean, the movie Fallen has, I mean, the devil wins in the end, the demon
yeah.
wins in the end, and that's a great movie. But like, it's because I don't know, there's a value that's missing in this book, and I can't define it off the top of
so
my
so
head.
there is some things of where he's doing some experimental or some writing tricks that I'd never seen anywhere else in Phil, which is like the fake news headlines. I've never seen him do that before, where they're used. I thought that scene was funny with the headline Runspool deplores old farts and fiery statement. So there was that whole part was funny. That part was
Yeah, when
funny.
Folk, what is his name?
Yeah,
Falk.
Dead
Runspool, dirty
boss.
little Jew from outside is um it just says is allegation, which is funny. And
The,
then
yeah,
like so
flight
when
of
he
fancy. I mean, that's
so because what he's doing with his headlines is he's saying this is what they're going to be saying about me internally, and he by doing these headlines,
but
that's something that
he's not saying that. It's Falk that's coming up with the headlines.
wait.
D'Ambrosio's boss, Seth
No,
Falk.
no,
Yeah.
no, that's Loesch.
Oh, you're right. That's right. Wait, who's Falk again? I
He's
forget.
the newspaper guy.
Okay, gotcha.
He comes up with the headlines.
Right.
There might be another section where Runcible does it.
Yeah, Runspool's thinking he's thinking these thoughts like he's kind of making fun of himself in the headlines. Like he's saying like this is what
Because
they're
there's more than one section with headlines. So
yeah. There's the other one is on page 215. Realtor's skull pronounced hoax by University of Cal scientists.
well,
And
that's the actual
that's the
chronicle.
actual headline, and then the one before is the ones that the ones that I read before are the ones he made up about
No,
himself.
that's Falk.
Are you sure? I'm pretty.
I'm fairly sure. 'Cause I
Well,
think
anyways, he's
the
doing
Runcible
some.
ones are later,
I thought those headlines were funny,
and it's letters that he writes.
and I thought that was some interesting Philness. Um, there was also, let me see, 215. Yeah, that's the University of California anthropologist. Oh, one thing I wanted to note on that, it said University of California anthropologist studying the recently unearthed alleged Stone Age skull by realtor Leon Runspool. It says, but it says anthropologists involved in detection of possible fraud, blah, 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 blah. What anthropologist do you think that they would have contacted? And then it occurred to me that it could have been Ursula Le Guin's parents, because they were anthropologists at the University of California, Berkeley. Okay, that's all I've got on this book. Do we want to start with our reviews? Okay, so I'll start off and say that, initially I gave this. Okay, initially I gave this book 2 fake skulls out of 5, but I think I'm going to give it an extra half skull back. So 2.5 skulls, because it did have more themes and issues going on upon discussion than I think I was initially giving it credit for. And I'm very close to giving it 3 skulls, but I just can't quite get there. Yeah. So not quite to 3 skulls. So
Big D.
Professor
I
Wilson?
I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 chuppers. Do you remember what those were?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Chuppers
didn't
were
we didn't really talk about that much, but
apparently those are the
But
deformed.
they're the same as in the Simulacra, which, when was that one written, David?
63.
So
Oh, okay.
the same time frame.
But so the Chuppers were from like the earlier 20th century family that drank the bad water and became
Yeah.
deformed. Yeah.
But in the Simulacra, they're actually
Are you thinking about Dr. Blood Money? Because Dr. Blood Money is the one that has all the mutants.
No.
Okay.
No, remember the Simulacra, the musician people go to Northern California, meet up with the Neanderthals in Northern California. You don't remember that?
I don't remember the Simulacra that well.
I'm going to have to look back at that.
There's 51 named characters or whatever he says in that one.
It may be our friends from Frolics 8 too, because there was like
No, it's the Simulacra.
But no, I'll give it 4 out of 5 Chuppers for this reason, as a dark, effectively rendered critique of patriarchy, misogyny, and racism, and alpha masculinity. Yeah, all those fun things.
I mean, that's,
yeah, and
I love
as
that.
an interesting soap opera.
I love that viewpoint because I absolutely did not see that. No, I can totally understand it as
Who knows what he was trying to do, but yeah.
But I don't give Phil that much credit.
I don't think he intended for it to be those things, but I think it ended up.
Oh yeah, who cares what he intended?
No. Yeah,
I'm just saying it could function that way.
You know, once I got in trouble in high school because there's a part of Hamlet that I thought was different than what was accepted as the interpretation of what he was saying in this one soliloquy, and I was like, no, fuck yeah, I don't care what everybody says. Like, oh, that was what the author's intention was. I don't fuck the author. Yeah. What does the author know?
I agree.
Yeah.
And there are no exceptions. Thank you.
Yeah, it's open to interpretation every time by whoever sees it.
Sure.
You know, how they take it is what's their reality of it. So
that's a good segue into your review.
My review. I'm gonna give it 2 Alfa Romeos. Because I don't know, maybe it's because I'm simple. Because like I just want someone to root for. And while I wanted to root for Sherry, I couldn't because she became such a coward at the end. And then I wanted to root for D'Ambrosio, but what an asshole he turned out to be. And Runcible, total asshole. What's her name? Janet. Fucking what? I don't even know what she was supposed to be.
Well, she was mostly characterized as an alcoholic, but so let me ask you.
That doesn't even mean anything. Like,
so let's say the two would it have resonated more with you if the two dudes got what they deserved in various ways, and then the women were empowered.
Some way.
That I think, and that might have made this book even more attractive to agents and publishers. You know,
I know that's why I'm saying I'm simple because like
I wouldn't say that, but
it's the, you know, I wanted there to be some positive resolution. It didn't have to be like everybody gets what they want, everybody gets what they deserve.
Which is one of the things that makes this novel outside of the PKD formula, because there's always, according to his formula, there's always supposed to be a humane act at the end of the book.
At the end? Oh, is that why he writes all those shitty codas?
Like, because he doesn't have any natural humane acts, so he can. Well, you know, and it depends.
He just throws one in at the end.
Like the humane act of Maze of Death is a dude deciding to be a cactus for the rest of eternity, and that's the humane act. So yeah, it's kind of open to interpretation.
But yeah, I mean, there's no one to root for here. There's nothing here that
there's no
I can latch onto and say, you know, at least this
happened in the end. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, Sherry is the most rootable character in the thing, but it's still tough.
But she ends up in utter sadness.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's not
she
fun.
seemed like the rest of her life is now charted for her, and she was absolutely headed to a good life, even given her privilege and everything about that. I was still like, well, here's someone that has a path and can stick to it, but she gets raped and then has the baby. So that's not great.
Nope.
No, it's terrible.
Not great at all.
So
I see you smiling, Big D.
No, I agree. You're right. I mean, she would
But
be
that's
best
like-
served by getting rid of
That's
Walt.
I mean, that seems like your jam. Like you're like
What's that?
you can revel in this badness.
This dark. Oh yeah, I love it.
The dark.
Absolutely. No, and I love.
And normally I would be right there with you, but I just require one
little nugget
of good.
Gotcha.
I guess I'm an optimist. But I felt bad after reading this. I felt like, wow, yeah.
And for me, it did make me feel things in a way that PKD does not really anymore, because I'm so familiar with his work and know what to expect.
Right.
So I appreciated it in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, on that note, so the next section I have is how would we do this as a movie treatment? And I just wrote nope. That's it. I'm not the movie.
This would be a great Lifetime special movie.
Maybe at the time.
Do it on Lifetime.
I got it. I mean, if we do a movie, we got to have a Neanderthal running around crazy, fucking people up at the end.
Yeah. I mean, you have to change it somewhat.
The unleashed ids.
And again, you need that nugget of happiness at the end.
And your nugget of happiness too. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. We'll do something for the gals, Janet and Sherry. They deserve to win.
Yeah. They need a win, even if it's not a big win.
Right.
All right. So we have 2 sections left.
Wait, I didn't even get to talk about who I would have directed.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I have no fucking clue.
I was going to say, all I've got is nope. No movie. No movie. We're not doing this one. Not even if
this is like the easiest one to do as a movie. But you're always like when we get to a straight novel, you're like, nope, no movie.
I mean, the title is why? Yes, he had.
I like the title. It's almost Catcher in the Rye style title.
Maybe it's the adverb. I don't know.
It's too long. Obviously,
I guess if you're doing like a pastoral film
I think like David says, if you get rid of exactly doesn't need to be in there.
No.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the difference between all alike and all exactly alike? Why is that?
You know who would really hate this title? Is Stephen King, because he hates adverbs.
Adverbs, yeah. Like the adverb doesn't even need to be in there at all.
No, it doesn't need to be there. Now, if I really, really was going to do a movie of this, you could make a pastoral. Like, I guess, like focus on, the misogyny and those issues that were maybe
focus on the women.
Yeah. Yes.
They'd be the main characters.
Yeah.
I'd like to see.
Yeah. You don't. The guys aren't the main characters. The women are the main characters.
Yeah.
And yet, I would title it Neanderthal. That's it.
I mean, that would be
Neanderthal.
that would actually work
kind of similar
on a lot of levels. Yeah.
The Neanderthal whose teeth were kind of similar. That would be my title for it.
Roughly.
All right. All right, we're almost done. Dicklike suggestions for this month. Does anyone want to go before me?
I will.
Okay.
Have you guys seen Beau is Afraid, the film?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
So super Phil Dickian, very dark, very surreal. Joaquin Phoenix's protagonist, Bo Wasserman, that's his name. Everything kind of happens to
Yeah,
him.
like the world changes around him or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no way you don't know if it's going on in his head or outside of his head, or
It looked really
I
Phil
think
Dickian, but it also looked 3 hours long, so that's scared me away.
it is the best movie I've seen in a long time. I mean,
Really?
it's not for everybody for sure. And I get really happy about gore and just sort of transgression in general. There's a whole thing with like his big balls that they rub in the face of the screen sometimes. And at any rate, it's like
Hey, David, remember that movie we saw? What was that movie about the guy that travels through John is Dead or something like that? And the doorknob turns into a dick. And he's like, well, this door's unusable.
Oh, it's John dies at the end.
John dies at the
oh
end.
yeah, sure,
Yeah.
right.
So is it like that?
Don Coscarelli,
No,
the director of
it-
Phantasm, directed
I-
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Bo is Afraid. I don't know. It's pretty unique, but at its core, the main Joaquin Phoenix's character, he exhibits like tons of Phil Dickian neuroses and peccadillos, and they're just uncanny similarities. So it's worth.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Not only did we see John
Got it.
dies at the end, but we're one of the few people that saw it in the theater because
Yeah.
it only played in a few theaters. And
Oh, really?
yeah, in Portland, wasn't that the Baghdad? Didn't we?
Yeah,
see
we
that?
saw it at the Baghdad.
Yeah, good times. Well, Bo Isn't Afraid. Yeah, it looks very Phil Dickian. I was scared away by the 3 hours because I wanted to go see it in the theater. We're big Joaquin Phoenix fans around here. But I have been scared away by the 3 hour runtime. But maybe
I used
I'll
to
put it
hate-
higher on the list. You know who else really liked that movie is Anthony Trevino.
Oh, okay.
Our former.
That's actually a good recommendation.
Yeah, Anthony.
I used to hate Joaquin Phoenix. Like his Gladiator,
Wrong.
he was
Oh
terrible.
yeah, that's right. I forgot
Terrible.
about Gladiator. Yeah.
Well, he hated
Like
being in that
his
movie.
early
by the way.
movies, he did not
Couldn't
start
tell.
as a good actor. But over the years, he's become an amazing actor.
Since The Master for me, kind of.
The Master was
See, I
hard
liked
to,
him since
The
8
Master was
millimeter.
hard to watch. I'll say that.
Yeah.
The Master was
I won't say
not my favorite film, but it was really good. Like
you didn't like him in Space Camp.
ugh. Or U-Turn or anything.
Oh, he was great. In
Oh
U-Turn.
my God, U-Turn. I forgot about.
Anything before U-Turn, I hate him. After U-Turn, I like him.
Okay. Well, I think 8 millimeter was right after U-Turn, but he was great in 8 millimeter.
8 millimeter.
That's.
Is that pre-Sony?
Was anybody good
Soprano.
in 8 millimeter?
I
Really?
love 8 millimeter. I will defend 8 millimeter.
Is Gandolfini in that?
Yes,
Yeah, pre-Soprano Gandolfini.
and Peter Stormare is great in it as Dino. What was it, Dino Velvet? Yeah, Dino
Yeah.
Velvet. Yeah, is his character. In fact, around these parts, we usually just refer to him as Dino Velvet when we see him in a movie. Whether it's a Big Lebowski, anything, we're like Dino Velvet.
Right.
And I know most people would not go there with Peter Stormare, but Peter Stormare, and I will connect to PKD, was the surgeon in Minority Report.
Yep.
Oh, really?
And the only scene worth watching.
No.
Who hated that? That's right.
Yeah.
The only
Oh yeah,
the
the
only,
quack
the only
doctor who
scene-
kept quacking, quack quack.
Yeah.
The only scene that wasn't a promotion for watches or cars or
We know you hate Minority Report. All right.
that movie.
So,
Fuck Steven Spielberg.
Larry, do you
Just to
have
bookend this properly.
Larry, do you have a Dicklike suggestion this month?
Yeah, it's sort of like this, where there's no happy endings. Is Frostpunk. It's a game by the people who did another fantastic game, This War of Mine. I think they are they're Eastern Bloc. I don't know if it's Ukraine or where they're from, but Frostpunk is basically the sun has been obscured by some means that we don't know. Either the sun's going out or there's volcanic ash in the air or something. But the world is just frozen. And a group of people leave London and the warmest place is actually the North Pole. So they head to the North Pole, and it's a society building game where you have to build the buildings so people can eat, they can live, they can work. There's revolts, so you have to either go. You can go one of two ways. You can go authoritarian, or you can go religious. That's your choice. There's no like, let's make this a democracy and everyone gets a vote. No, authoritarian or the church runs everything. So it's all sadness all the time. People die constantly. Everyone is unhappy. Everyone is sick. Everyone is starving. And you try to maintain and build a society in basically a hole in the North Pole. It is utter sadness in a game. I will throw this war of mine into the mix as well, which is there's a war that is happening or has just happened, and you're in a war-torn country. It's all black and white. The game is pure black and white. And you start with 2 or 3 characters in an abandoned house, and they have to survive by like coming up with a way to get water, get food, get heat, because it's also frozen. And it's pure sadness the whole time as well. So if you want to play the man whose teeth were all exactly alike in video game form, try Frostpunk. Or
is it new?
This War of Mine. There's actually a Frostpunk 2 that has come out, but no, it's not new. I think this War of Mine is now.
That sounds really interesting. Even though it violates my new rule of supporting anything that adds punk to a genre at this point. Like,
I actually don't know why it's called Frostpunk.
I saw one the other day that's like we're creating title punk, and then there was lunar punk, and I was just like, what the fuck is title punk?
I think it's a play on oh shit, what is the punk that they use?
The original Cyberpunk?
Cyberpunk.
No, like the old timey.
Oh, steampunk.
Steampunk. I think it's a play on steampunk. So
is there like is there a Victorian aesthetic?
Sort of.
Yeah.
So I was okay with cyberpunk.
The religion is very Victorian in its application, but
I was okay with cyberpunk because at least John Shirley wore dog collars and was in a punk band. But
cyberpunk's been around since then.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then steampunk was okay because it was just one more. But when you've gotten to the point of title and looter punk,
yeah,
and hope punk, that's one too. Hope punk. It's supposed to be like positive sci-fi. It's called hope punk. Like, no, just
what?
I once wrote an introduction for an anthology.
That's an oxymoron, first of all.
Yeah, I know.
I wrote an intro for an anthology called Monk Punk years ago, and traced everything from cyberpunk up to that point. This was like in the 2000s. Of course, Monk Punk disappeared almost immediately after that anthology came out, but people still try to capitalize on it, don't they? Yeah.
Yep.
I know. All right, so
it reminds me of rockabilly. How I used to hang with a bunch of rockabilly band guys, and every rockabilly band has like 7 other things that are associated with it. Cyberbilly, psychobilly,
Oh yeah.
Billy.
Yeah.
There's all these other titles for it. Western Billy.
Bob Billy. All right. So
My friend never knew what his band was going to be called. Like they consider themselves rockabilly, but then he'd be like, "So what does this newspaper call us?" Oh, okay. Apparently, we're all these things too.
So for my Dicklike suggestions, I considered the TV series 12 Monkeys, but then said no. But I did like the series 12 Monkeys. I did watch all 4 seasons, and
Crazy as a loon.
yeah. And I do think it's okay, but that's not going to be my Dicklike suggestion. I'm
Is
going to
that
make
worth watching though, David?
it is.
Yeah.
There's a few times where it gets a little.
Just watch Le Jeté and get it over with.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that what they're doing?
20 minutes.
Yeah.
20 minutes and you're done.
Yeah, I think maybe like 1 season less I could have done with, but like I don't know, it was good. And
All right.
12 Monkeys series gave Terry Metalis, made him a showrunner, and then he went on to do the best season of Star Trek Picard, and that wouldn't have happened without 12 Monkeys. And he brought a lot of the 12 Monkeys actors over to it, so I'll give him credit for that.
Okay.
But my Dicklike suggestions, I have a nonfiction book and a fiction book. For my nonfiction, I have the new edition of Counterfeit Worlds, which just came out this month from Brian J. Robb. There is a 2006 edition, and this new edition is updated with Electric Dreams and Man in the High Castle and Blade Runner 2049. And so it's up to the date. Brian does really good history. He gets into the backstory. He obviously reads the books. He doesn't just cover the movies. He knows the themes. He's coming on the podcast at some point. I think he's going to cover Blade Runner 2049 with us, which we've never done an episode on. And then the introduction, the world's Dick made, has a really good history. And I only nitpicked one fact in the entire book, which is that he called Earthshaker a straight mainstream novel, and it's a Gnostic fantasy. That's the only thing he got wrong in the whole book. So that's pretty good.
I talked to Brian, and he's sending me a copy of that. I'm gonna review it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I really like it, and it has a really detailed history of the making of Blade Runner and Total Recall and the various versions of Total Recall. So we're eventually going to cover the Dan O'Bannon script for Total Recall, which you will find in this.
By the way, one of our patrons, Patreoners, or whatever they're called now,
Patrons,
Patreoners, is very much looking forward to a Dan O'Bannon episode.
We're getting there.
I told him you guys were working on it.
Yeah, I've got the Total Recall script.
I want to. Don't we have to read that? Because I have it. His book on screenwriting.
Yeah, I don't have that yet. But we'll get there.
He wrote a book on screenwriting.
Dan O'Bannon wrote a book on screenwriting. Yes.
Yep.
And you have to include the comic book he did with Mobius.
Counterfeit Worlds is my nonfiction suggestion. My fiction suggestion is the winner of this year's PKD Award for Best Novel, and that's The Extractionist by Kimberly Unger, and it's pretty good. I wouldn't say I don't know if it's going to make my top 10 list this year because it's pretty stacked this year, but I liked it. It's about people who get stuck in virtual worlds, and the main character is an extractionist who will pull you back to reality.
So it's an actual Dick winner?
Yeah, it won the It won the PKD award, and it actually has Dickian themes for once. Yes.
Yeah, because a lot of those winners don't really have those themes, do they?
Nope.
Yeah.
But this
No,
time
because
it does, and so it is actually
or I still don't understand the award, but it's for
paperback.
best paperback something.
Yeah, paperback original, meaning that
Paperback original.
Yeah, it's
So it just means it never had a hardcover release.
It never had a hardcover release, and it was released straight to paperback. And this particular one, yeah, it's very cyberpunky, like people trapped in realities, but updated. And the woman who wrote it's an actual computer programmer, so a lot of it went straight up there and over my head, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Do you want me to read the synopsis?
No, yeah. What's coming up next,
What's next?
Professor Wilson?
Okay, puttering about in a small land. And I got a little blurb here from Publishers Weekly, which was printed in this blurb in 1985. Since his death in 1982, Dick's reputation has reached cult status, fueling the publication of many previously unpublished works. In this, one of his mainstream novels, Dick is most perceptive about the relationships between men and women. The story concerns Roger Lindahl, 30-ish, intense, very competent, but also very insecure. Shocker. He is married to Virginia, a cool, intelligent, distant woman. The Lindahls meet Chick and Liz Bonner. And as a friendship between the couples develops, Roger finds himself attracted to warm, earthy, simple Liz. The two stumble into an absurd affair, and when Virginia discovers what has happened, she blackmails her husband out of his business and what is left of his self-respect. Dick demonstrates a surer hand at delineating the complexities of married life than in most of his works, and he crafts the story with such skill that, though the conclusion has the inevitability of a Greek tragedy, it is fresh and unpredictable. There you go.
Well, he had a tendency to fall in love with his friends' wives. So whether it's Grania Davis or Kristen Nelson, it happened a couple times.
Yeah, didn't they do some heavy petting? The Nelsons and the Dicks.
Well, yeah, there was
According to
rumors about that, but we'll get into that.
I thought Nelson said that.
He did, yeah.
There was all kinds of rogue heavy petting going on in the Dick household, I think.
Yeah. It was funny because I saw an interview with Ray Nelson where he's like, we weren't exactly swappers.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I don't know where that. Yeah. But Grania Davis left, or she was going to divorce Avron Davidson already when she and Dick had their brief relationship. So she was already they were both heading to divorce on their own.
So that's what this novel's about.
So we'll see you next time for Puttering About in a Small World. I think
Small
land,
Yeah.
Whatever.
Puttering About in a Small World would be something entirely different.
It's a small world after all.
It's a small world.
All right. On that note, keep it, Barney. Keep it paranoid.
Barney.
Stay paranoid. You too, Barney. All right.